Good morning. Welcome to the February 2017 meeting of the Federal Communications Commission. Madam Secretary, would you please introduce our agenda this morning?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to you and good morning, Commissioners. For today's meeting, you will hear 6 items for your consideration. First, you will consider a report and order and associated further notice of proposed rulemaking to adopt rules providing ongoing support targeted to preserve and advance high-speed mobile broadband and voice service in high-cost areas that the marketplace does not otherwise serve. Second, you will consider a report and order on reconsideration that resolves a number of issues raised in the Phase 2 auction order further notice of proposed rulemaking, including the adoption, weights to compare bids among service performance and latency tiers, and consider several petitions for reconsideration for decisions made in the Phase 2 auction order. Third, you will consider a notice of proposed rulemaking that proposes to let television broadcasters use the next generation broadcast television transmission standard associated with recent work of the Advanced Television Systems Committee on a voluntary, market-driven basis. Fourth, you will consider a second report and order that would relax the citing rule for an FM fill-in translator rebroadcasting an AM broadcast station. Fifth, you will consider an order granting a 5-year waiver to broadband internet access service providers with 250,000 or fewer broadband connections from the enhanced reporting requirements adopted in the 2015 Title II order. Sixth, you will consider a report and order that would streamline and eliminate outdated accounting rules no longer needed to fulfill the Commission's statutory or regulatory duties. This is your agenda for today. Please note the consent agenda as listed in the Commission's February 2017 Sunshine Notice has been adopted by the Commission and deleted from the agenda. The first item, entitled Connect America Fund, a National Broadband Plan for Our Future, establishing just and reasonable rates for local exchange carriers, will be presented by the Wireline Competition Bureau and the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau. Neisha Gindelsberger, Acting Chief of the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, will give the introduction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Is that it?
You know, yes.
Ms. Gundelsberger, please proceed.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. It's my pleasure to introduce the Mobility Fund Phase 2 Report and Order and further notice of proposed rulemaking. The item provides for ongoing universal service support dedicated to expanding the availability of mobile broadband networks by targeting support to high-cost areas where no unsubsidized providers offer 4G LTE service. The item is the second phase of the Mobility Fund, which was created by the Commission as part of comprehensive reform of high-cost universal service support in 2011. I am joined at the table by Jim Schlichting, Senior Deputy Chief of Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, Margaret Wiener, Chief of the Auctions and Spectrum Access Division, and Mark Montano, Attorney Advisor in that division. Chris Mantit, Chief of the Wireline Competition Bureau, and Alex Minard, Deputy Chief of the Telecommunication Access Policy Division in the Wireline Competition Bureau. In addition to the team at the table, I would like to thank the WTB staff in the Auctions Division and the Competition and Infrastructure Policy Division, as well as staff in the Wireline Competition Bureau for their hard work and commitment to delivering this order. Those people are listed in the slide you can see. Mark will present the item, and thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. We are pleased to present for your consideration a report and order and further notice of proposed rulemaking that establishes Phase 2 of the Mobility Fund. Building on the first phase, which provided one-time universal service support to mobile providers, the order would provide up to $4.53 billion over the next decade to mobile providers to make meaningful progress in closing the 4G LTE coverage gap, while discharging the Commission's obligation to provide support in a fiscally responsible manner. I will now briefly summarize the item's key provisions. First, consistent with Phase 1 of the Mobility Fund, the overall approach of the order would be to award high-cost universal service support via a reverse auction to at most one provider per area, and to redirect support dollars that currently go to providers that compete with private capital to areas where it is truly needed to expand 4G LTE coverage. Second, the order would adopt a budget of $453 million per year over a 10-year term. Of this amount, we expect that around $34 million per year would be reserved specifically for support to mobile providers serving tribal lands. All Phase 2 support will end after 10 years, which will provide ample time for support recipients to complete network construction or upgrades, and also allow the Commission to reassess the marketplace and determine whether a new support mechanism will be needed going forward. Third, areas eligible for Phase 2 support would be based on certified coverage data provided to the Commission by carriers on their Form 477, analyzed on a sub-census block basis to reveal areas where 4G LTE at 5 megabits per second does not exist or is only provided with universal service support. Because there may be questions about particular representations of coverage, the order decides that there will be a challenge process, and the further notice of proposed rulemaking seeks further comment on the specifics of that process. The order would award support in eligible areas on a per square mile basis. Fourth, the order would provide for a rapid phase-down of current identical support. We will endeavor to conclude the Phase 2 auction in about a year. Starting the month following the close of the auction, the order would begin the transition of legacy support to Phase 2 support to winning bidders, as well as a 2-year phase-down of legacy support to providers that do not win Phase 2 support. In eligible areas where there is no winning bid, however, legacy support would continue for 5 years without a phase-down for the one provider that receives the minimum level of sustainable support. Fifth, the order would require recipients of Phase 2 support to deploy 4G LTE, today's top mobile technology. The order would establish throughput standards of at least a median of 10 megabits per second download and 1 megabit per second upload, a latency standard, and a data allowance, with deployment benchmarks at the end of the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th years of support. By the end of the 6th year, Phase 2 recipients must cover 85% of their support areas in a state and at least 75% of every census block group or tract in that state for which they are receiving support. The Bureau recommends adoption of this item and requests editorial privileges to make technical or conforming edits.
Thank you, Mr. Montano, for that compelling presentation. We will now hear comments from the bench, starting with Commissioner Clyburn.
Thank you. If the ultimate goal, once and for all, is to bridge the broadband divide, then a mobility fund must be among the regulatory elements we erect. Ever since the FCC adopted its comprehensive universal service reforms in 2011, I have pushed for a long-term solution that a mobility fund Phase 2 auction could bring. And as recently as last month, I reiterated this view in an op-ed penned and published with Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia. Mobility is one of our country's greatest gifts. This untethered means of being connected has unlocked new markets for commerce, been a public safety lifeline for millions, and to sum it up most succinctly, has improved and transformed all of our lives. Mobile health monitoring options are bringing about better patient outcomes, and mobile hotspots are helping children who are not so privileged to complete their homework. Then there's a promise of 5G. It has been projected that the proposed next generation of mobile standards will add about $2.7 trillion to the U.S. GDP by 2030. But as we peer into a 5G future, we cannot lose sight of the fact that too many remain stuck in a 3G 2G, or no G world. When I visited Navajo Nation as part of my Connecting Communities tour last year, I met Lucienda, a young lady who said that without the FCC's Lifeline program, her community would be really living back in the 1800s. Even 3G mobile broadband is a game changer for Lucienda and many others because low-income communities in this day and age are disproportionately smartphone dependent. Ensuring consistent mobile coverage for those who can barely afford that mobile handset, much less both a fixed and mobile connection, is a priority for me, as it should be for us all. Solving these challenges will require a delicate mix of public-private dollars, along with many, many years of careful planning. We do right by rural America today with the creation of a framework that will bring reasonably comparable mobile service to those who have been without. And we do so through a multi-billion-dollar effort, efficiently targeted via reverse auction mechanism that is carefully calibrated to preserve existing support where it is necessary and expressly designed to build mobile broadband networks where it is missing. I am grateful to my colleagues for supporting my request to institute a challenge process that is not unduly burdensome on small providers, and while we may not have all of the elements in place today, we seek further comment on how best to structure a process that is both fair and balanced. While this will mean more work for the commission staff, sorry, Neshe, it is the right call and will yield the best results in the most expeditious way. I am likewise grateful that one of the options my office suggested for the challenge process is contained in the further notice, but of course we remain open to further refinements and welcome other ideas to ensure an optimal result. I must again express how grateful I am to my colleagues. You may say I don't do that often. You may be right. For endorsing a slower phase down of support for providers relying on legacy funding. It is only fair that we take rational business planning into account and that we do nothing to run the risk of leaving any consumer without cell phone service. Chairman Pai, I want to especially thank you and your staff for working closely with my office to address outstanding concerns and for accommodating my many, many edits. Last but certainly not least, to the staff of the Wireline Competition Bureau and the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, your work on this item and your commitment to bringing mobile broadband to rural and tribal communities across this nation, you deserve to be commended over and over again. So, on behalf of the American people, I thank you all.
Thank you, Commissioner Clyburn. Feeling the love, and I'm returning the love. Commissioner O'Reilly.
Don't know what to say. I know.
I'll share some love your way, too, if you like. It's all good here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through Mobility Fund Phase 2, the Commission seeks to expand 4G LTE coverage to areas that are unserved or would be uneconomic to serve absent a subsidy. While I raised concerns in the past regarding whether a separate technology-specific fund was the best way to go, some of the decisions made in the 2011 Connect America Fund item have proven too difficult to revisit, even if more logical outcomes and greater efficiencies were possible. For that reason, I approached this item with the best intentions and the goal of making the fund as functional and economical as I could. Accordingly, I generally support this order and further notice, which contains a number of improvements I requested to the order that circulated last year. Among other things, the item commits to conduct a nationwide multi-round reverse auction, shifts from road miles to a better, though not perfect, geographic areas mechanism, ensures that there is no duplication between Mobility Fund Phase 2 and the Remote Areas Fund, and provides for greater input from the full Commission on future decisions. I also appreciate the willingness of my colleagues to make additional changes to help promote the success of the program. First, a critical component of any subsidy program is determining which areas should be eligible for funding. Decisions premised on inaccurate data or faulty assumptions could result in either wasteful overbuilding or a loss of service for consumers. For this reason, we have reformed each of the high-cost universal service programs. We have included a challenge process to ensure that these vital decisions are based on the best possible data, while not unduly burdening participants or staff. Moreover, in order for a challenge process to be successful, the standards and acceptable forms of evidence must be clearly spelled out with enough time for participants to be able to assemble the data or evidence to support their filings. Therefore, I am pleased that we will now seek further comment on the challenge process. I, too, want to move forward quickly with the auction, but I expect that by taking time to resolve these questions now, we will avoid mistakes and delays at the back end. Second, I sought to ensure that the order contained sensible build-out requirements, recognizing the limitations of our overall funding capabilities and the territory to be covered. Well, I certainly want to maximize the areas and consumers that will receive service. If the requirements are unrealistic, we run the risk that potential bidders will decide not to participate, or the providers will have to return funding several years from now. Third, the Commission commits to adopt performance goals and metrics so that we can evaluate the effectiveness of the program. Finally, I support Commissioner Clyburn's focus on setting reasonable phase downs, which also complements my request that they not be too long. This notwithstanding, I continue to have significant reservations about certain aspects of the order, such as locking in a 10-year term before we've made other key decisions. Moreover, the tribal provisions would have benefited from more thought regarding how they interact with other USF programs and decisions, such as RAFT. These decisions are likely to lead to greater inefficiencies than if we had taken the time to find appropriate compromises based on hard data and facts. On balance, however, this order is a relative step in the right direction. I am hopeful with additional input from interested parties on the remaining decisions and further collaboration with my colleagues, the Commission will complete Mobility Fund Phase 2 in a manner that maximizes this funding to the benefit of rural consumers. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Reilly. Last October, I found myself on the road from Wichita, Kansas to Des Moines, Iowa. I grew up in that part of the world, but even I had never been through some of the small towns we drove through, like Allen, Kansas, Bethany, Missouri, and Osceola, Iowa. More often than I would have liked, I found that the signal on my mobile phone was either very weak or non-existent, and that was even on relatively major roads, like Interstate 35. That experience brought home to me the need to expand the availability of mobile broadband in rural areas, and it underscored the importance of a key part of the digital empowerment agenda I had proposed 1 month before. Specifically in September 2016, I called for moving forward quickly with Phase 2 of the Mobility Fund. For far too long, the Commission has not kept its promise to rural America to hold an MF2 auction. And while urban and suburban America continue to see improvements in mobile service, many rural areas continue to be dead zones. We cannot leave these areas behind. From precision agriculture to the sharing economy, mobile broadband is increasingly critical to rural America. With this order, the Commission begins to deliver for this part of the country. First, we make available $4.53 billion in new funding over 10 years for building mobile networks where the market would not otherwise do so. Second, where the market already provides LTE service without its public subsidy, we redirect legacy subsidies to areas that need the help. Simply put, we are going to spend money in the areas that are most in need so that 4G LTE coverage knows no geographic limitations in our nation. Now, a few key features of MF2 warrant mention. First, we will use a reverse auction to ensure that funds are distributed efficiently. This will help see that taxpayers get the most bang for their universal service buck. Second, we will use geographic areas as the bidding unit, and we do this because mobile networks are increasingly important for services like precision agriculture or remote monitoring, services which don't necessarily take place along roadways or in population centers. Third, we seek public comment on establishing, as Commissioner Clyburn mentioned, a robust challenge process for determining the set of areas eligible for bidding. And this will allow parties to help ensure that our data about what's covered and what's not is accurate so that we can target funding to the areas that lack service. I appreciate the stakeholders who have come forward in recent days with specific and constructive suggestions for how we should structure that challenge process. And I look forward to reviewing the record that will be compiled in response to their proposals. Fourth, we follow through on the Commission's commitment to conduct Tribal Mobility Fund Phase 2 in order to advance wireless service on tribal lands. And fifth, whenever possible, we align Phase 2 of the Mobility Fund with Connect America Fund Phase 2, which we'll speak about in a minute, which the Commission unanimously adopted last year. And in this way, both MF2 and CAF2 will have considerable similarities in terms of their support terms, their compliance rules, and their build-out requirements. In conclusion, let me thank the terrific staffs of both the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau and the Wireline Competition Bureau. And thank you specifically to Rita Cookmeyer, Melvin Del Rosario, Judith Dempsey, Chaz Eberly, Ben Freeman, Nisha Gundelsberger, Audra Hale-Maddox, Katie King, Angela Kung, Heidi Lankau, Elliot Maynor, Carol Maddie, Sue McNeil, Alok Mehta, Gary Michaels, Chris Miller, Alex Minard, Mark Montano, Chris Monteith, Murtaza Nasafi, Ryan Palmer, Kelly Quinn, Alex Ryback, Paroma Sanyal, Jim Schlichting, Patrick Sun, Tom Tran, Margie Wiener, and Joseph Wire. Probably would have been easier to list the people at the Commission who didn't work on Mobility Fund Phase 2. But I want you to know that I am personally grateful because I'm keenly aware of the intense amount of effort that went into producing this complicated but critical item. And the good news is that you will now be penalized for your expertise because we will be asking you to do even more in the time to come to move to an auction as quickly as possible. Seriously put, though, your efforts are critical in the battle to close the digital divide, and I am very happy that you are the FCC staff on the front lines. So thank you for your efforts, and with that, we will proceed to a vote on the item. Could each of my colleagues please indicate if you are approving, concurring, or dissenting, or some combination thereof? And we'll start with Commissioner Clyburn.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Reilly.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye as well. The ayes have it, so ordered, with editorial privileges granted for technical and conforming edits.
Can I just mention, on that point on editorial privileges, I look forward to fixing and actually establishing editorial privileges as part of our internal rules. And I thank the chairman for his deep work on this issue and his promises to address this going forward. So I will not object on that point. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Reilly. Madam Secretary, could you please announce the next item on the agenda for today?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, the next item on your agenda will be presented by the Wireline Competition Bureau. It is entitled Connect America Fund, ETC Annual Reports and Certifications, and Chris Monteith, Acting Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. And Ms. Monteith, once you get situated, feel free to proceed. Very nice.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. I'm pleased to present for your consideration an order that takes another step towards implementing the Connect America Phase 2 auction. Today's order will finalize some of the decisions necessary to proceed with that auction, in which service providers will compete to receive support of up to $1.98 billion to offer voice and broadband service in unserved, high-cost areas. The actions the Commission considers today, combined with the framework for the Phase 2 auction the Commission adopted last May, aim to expand broadband availability in rural areas. They also seek to maximize the value the American people receive for the universal service dollars the Commission spends, balancing higher quality service with cost efficiencies. I would like to acknowledge and thank the entire Wireline Competition Bureau team that worked so hard on this order. Seated with me today at the table are Ryan Palmer, Chief of WCB's Telecommunications Access Policy Division, and Alexander Minard, Deputy Chief of the Telecommunications Access Policy Division. Alex will present the item.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Today's order builds on the Connect America Phase 2 auction framework the Commission adopted last May by resolving certain key issues raised in the further notice of proposed rulemaking. The Connect America Phase 2 auction will allocate support for providers to offer voice and broadband services meeting the Commission's requirements to certain high-cost areas, thereby paving the way for the deployment of new broadband infrastructure to millions of unserved Americans. Last May, the Commission adopted 4 technology-neutral service performance tiers available for bidding with increasing speed and usage allowance. The Commission also adopted 2 latency tiers for bidders proposing to offer high and low latency services. To maximize competition, the Commission decided that all bids would be considered simultaneously, with weights applied to the various tiers. Today's order establishes those weights for comparing bids among the service performance and latency tiers. Specifically, minimum performance bids will have a weight of 65. Baseline performance bids will have a weight of 45. Above baseline performance bids will have a weight of 15, and gigabit performance bids will have a weight of 0. High latency bids will have a weight of 25, and low latency bids will have a weight of 0 added to their respective performance tier weight. This approach aims to balance the Commission's objective of serving as many consumers as possible with its preference for higher speeds, higher usage allowances, and lower latency, while also giving all potential bidders the opportunity to place competitive bids regardless of the technology they intend to use. The order also reaffirms the Commission's commitment to the efficient and equitable distribution of support nationwide. The order declines to adopt any additional weighting for the Phase 2 auction so that the auction's budget is maximized by awarding support to cost-effective bids. The Commission will then be able to use what it learns from observing the outcome of the Phase 2 auction to determine how best to target, in the Remote Areas Fund auction, support to high-cost areas in states and on tribal lands that remain unserved. The order declines to adopt alternative interim milestones for non-terrestrial service providers or service providers that already have deployed infrastructure, concluding that such providers already have incentives to begin quickly offering service meeting the Commission's requirements. Finally, the order addresses several petitions for reconsideration of the Phase 2 auction order. The order denies a petition requesting that the Commission reconsider its decisions to score bids relative to the applicable reserve price. The order grants a petition requesting the Commission reconsider its decision to re-auction areas served by high latency providers that do not meet a certain subscribership level, instead providing all authorized recipients with a full 10-year term of support if they comply with the Phase 2 terms and conditions. And the order grants a petition requesting the Commission reconsider its usage allowances for the above baseline and gigabit performance tiers, adopting a minimum monthly usage allowance of 2 terabytes of data for both tiers. The Bureau recommends adoption of this report and order on reconsideration, and requests editorial privileges extending only to technical and conforming edits. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We will now hear comments from the bench, starting with Commissioner Clyburn.
Thank you. Thanks to today's action, we take another step forward in this agency's ongoing effort to close the broadband deployment gap. By auctioning off almost $2 billion in universal service support to bring broadband to unserved and underserved communities, we do so in a manner that is as fair as possible to potential bidders and puts consumers first. This order carefully calibrates how we craft our auction decisions to enable robust competition and obtain the best bang for our universal service bucks. It ensures that carriers have certainty throughout the term of support, makes changes so that the higher bid tiers meet the needs of consumers, and commits to moving forward with the Remote Areas Fund, an issue that Commissioner O'Reilly and I have been pushing for a long time. It would have been my preference to include a tribal bidding credit in the item so that some of the most challenging places to serve would be more enticing to carriers seeking to participate in this auction. As I witnessed during my Connecting Communities tour, as I mentioned in the last statement, there are many unique challenges to bringing broadband to tribal areas, and I lament this missed opportunity to bring these communities much-needed connectivity. But I want to commend Chairman Pai, for the second time I'm banking these things, for bringing forward 2 significant broadband infrastructure items so early in his term. I applaud the chairman's determination for getting broadband deployed to the American people, and I enthusiastically join in these efforts. But as we all know, infrastructure deployment is only one element or one part of this challenge. We are charged by Congress to make available to all people of the United States, without discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, national origin, or sex, a rapid, efficient, nationwide and worldwide wire and radio communication service. I submit that no network is truly available, nor will any effort to shrink the chronic digital canyons that exist in this nation until broadband service is both affordable and accessible. This indeed is the full promise of our nation's universal service regime, and we should never overlook the fact that the first principle of universal service that Congress chose to enshrine in Section 254 of the Communications Act is quality service at affordable rates. While we rightly debate how to weigh and structure this auction, we are ever mindful that a truly successful auction will feature robust bidding by many different service providers using various technologies. We are hopeful for successful build-out timelines and ultimately more homes being connected, but what we can ill afford to ignore is the fact that about half of the homes passed in the poorest areas of this nation will more likely not sign up for service, not because they do not want it or need it. They will more likely not sign up because they cannot afford it. When our own data pegs the cost of basic broadband at over $75 a month, it is easy to understand why many families forego service, particularly if they make less than $20,000 a year. We will never truly address, nor will we ever successfully close the digital and opportunities divide in this country simply by supporting a single provider in an area and hoping, and I'm co-opting a line from that disembodied voice we heard in Field of Dreams, that if you build it, they will come. In wealthy areas, deployment with very little ease makes broadband truly available for those citizens, for the people who live there. But in less prosperous areas, in those communities, mere deployment is but a technology bridge to nowhere. So I am hopeful that in our continued efforts to work comprehensively to address the digital divide, that we will bring as much firepower to the affordability and accessibility gaps as we are bringing to tackling long-standing deployment challenges. Last but certainly not least, I want to thank the Wireline Competition Bureau staff for all of their hard work on this item. You have been very busy this month, and I appreciate all of the thoughtful, data-driven work that went into developing this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Clyburn. Commissioner O'Reilly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The order before us makes several important decisions that should bring us closer to starting the Connect America Fund Phase 2 auction. I support the order on reconsideration as well as the decisions to refrain from adopting additional bidding credits or preferences in this auction, including for particular states or tribal lands. At the same time, I do have strong disagreements to other aspects of the order. When the Commission adopted the framework for CAF Phase 2 auction last year, it was the result of many months of hard work and discussion to ensure that the framework would set the stage for a vibrant and competitive auction free from political interference or technology-based biases. Even as I led this effort, I observed that setting weights for the 4 service tiers, a decision deferred until now, would be critical to preserving the balance between broadband performance and cost effectiveness. I made clear my goal was to maximize participation in the auction in order to drive down subsidies and expand coverage to as many consumers as possible. And I've cautioned that if waiting skews the auction results such that few communities receive gigabit service, but more have no access at all, then the auction will have failed to deliver on our obligations of universal service. We've received a number of proposals in the record. And not surprising, the proposals tend to lean in one direction or another depending on the filer's preferred technology. After conferring with staff, it became apparent that we could not predict with any certainty the impact of any particular proposal. especially given the rush time frame. However, it did seem that proposals with a narrower range were more likely to garner bidders from all tiers, promoting a robust auction and maximizing coverage. Unfortunately, this order adopts a broader range than what was even proposed and circulated as part of white copy, and now appears designed to favor the highest speed tiers at the expense of more people getting broadband. I support the goal of providing consumers with high-quality broadband service, but as I said before, we should buy fewer Lamborghinis and more Chevys. The order also places a penalty on latency that is unreasonably severe given the prior Commission action to set a tough but achievable latency standard that was specifically selected to ensure sufficient quality for most purposes, including voice calls. Additionally, the particular weights adopted in this order were decided at the last moment with what appears to be little to no factual basis, with merely a plea for deference. We've not had the benefit of public comment on this particular structure and could end up in a position where we must reconsider them, something I would be very open to considering and reviewing. I'm also concerned that the tiers adopted today will have the effect of spending a disproportionate amount of funding on services that far exceed what we can afford and concentrating that funding in relatively low-cost areas. The impact of tipping the scales is far from trivial. According to one filing, it could mean the difference in serving hundreds of thousands of additional locations. Another commenter presented maps that showed in stark detail the parts of the country that may go unserved by CAF Phase 2 if tiers have the effect of excluding certain technologies. This thinly disguised end run around the important principle of technology neutrality heaps a heavier load on the already unfunded and barely conceptualized Remote Areas Fund, and after having spent nearly all of our high-cost budget. Moreover, the order further constrains the RAF by deciding to set aside subsidies for certain states. This decision is unfortunate, yet inevitable outgrowth of the recent New York order that I warned would happen. I realize that consumers in areas served by price cap carriers that declined the Commission's prior offer of funding need to be served. At the same time, there are unserved high-cost and extremely high-cost areas in other states that have been awaiting the promise of the Remote Areas Fund just as long, and is equally important to connect consumers in these areas as well. The Commission's objective is to ensure that our high-cost programs promote broadband deployment to consumers throughout the nation, including those in areas that were declined and places that never received offers in the first instance. Differentiating amongst unserved consumers depending on whether they are part of a territory of a carrier that received an offer of support does not serve that objective. That is particularly true when it comes to RAF, which is the final backstop for unserved communities. Promising set-asides is a quick way to guarantee inefficiency, waste, and higher costs. More importantly, this isn't what the representatives from those states were seeking, so it doesn't actually solve anything. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Reilly. 6 years ago, the FCC promised to launch the Connect America Fund to support deployment of broadband in rural America. Our target for launching the competitive bidding process was 2012, with funding winding down in 2017. Needless to say, the Commission fell behind schedule. And that's unfortunate because there is a real and growing digital divide in this country. Although high-speed internet access is common in metropolitan areas, the rural-urban split is stark. 39% of rural Americans lack adequate access. It is time, as I've said many times before, to close the digital divide. And that's why the first vote of my chairmanship was to partner with the state of New York, including Governor Cuomo, Senator Schumer, and Congressman Collins, to accelerate the deployment of broadband to people upstate who have waited far too long for it. That's why my first two meetings involved conversations with consumer advocates and small providers on ways to promote digital empowerment. And that's why we are moving forward today with our own competitive bidding process to bring the highest quality broadband services at the lowest cost to the taxpayer to those many Americans who have been waiting. The Connect America Fund Phase 2, or CAF 2 auction, will offer, as Chief Monteith pointed out, almost $2 billion to bidders to connect the unserved over the next decade. CAF 2 incorporates rules that my colleagues, Commissioner Clyburn and Commissioner O'Reilly, hammered out last year to induce new entrants to participate. Competitive entrants like wireless internet service providers, small-town cable operators, and electric utilities. And today, we adopt auction weights designed to give every bidder, no matter what technology they use, a meaningful opportunity to compete for federal funds, while ensuring the best value for the American taxpayer. We also take steps to ensure that the citizens of every state that was promised new, better, faster broadband service by the FCC back in 2015 will see that funding come through to their state, either in this auction, which I hope takes place as soon as possible, or in the Remote Areas Fund that will follow on its heels. I'd like to thank the superb staff of the Wireline Competition Bureau and the Office of Strategic Planning and Policy Analysis who worked so diligently to prepare this order in record time. Talmadge Cox, Katie King, Evan Quarell, Paul LaFontaine, Heidi Lankau, Wayne Layton, Carol Maddie, Alex Minard, Chris Monteith, and Ryan Palmer. This is a major milestone in our efforts to shrink the digital divide, and it wouldn't have reached this point without your work. And with that, we will proceed to a vote on the item. Commissioner Clyburn.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Reilly.
Approve in part and dissent in part.
And the chair votes aye. The ayes have it, so ordered, with editorial privileges granted for technical and conforming edits. Madam Secretary, if you could please announce the next item on today's agenda.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, the third item on your agenda will be presented by the Media Bureau and the Office of Engineering and Technology. It is entitled Authorizing Permissive Use of the Next Generation Broadcast Television Standard. Michelle Carey, Acting Chief of the Media Bureau, will give the introduction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Ms. Carey, when you are ready, please proceed.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners.
Good morning.
The notice of proposed rulemaking before you seeks to allow television broadcasters to innovate by authorizing voluntary use of the Next Generation Broadcast Television Transmission Standard, called ATSC 3.0, on a market-driven basis. Joining me at the table are Martha Heller, Steve Brokart, and Brendan Murray from the Policy Division, and Julie Knapp, Martin Dozcat, and Barbara Pavon of the Office of Engineering and Technology. Although not at the table, I'd like to recognize the tireless efforts of Evan Baranoff, who suffered a recent shoulder injury and cannot be with us today. But in his absence, Brendan Murray will present the item.
Morning, Chairman Pai, Commissioner Clyburn, Commissioner O'Reilly. We are pleased to present this notice of proposed rulemaking in which we propose to let TV broadcasters use the next generation ATSC 3.0 transmission standard while they continue to deliver their current generation digital television or DTV service using the ATSC 1.0 standard. According to a petition that was filed with the Commission requesting the authorization of ATSC 3.0, this new standard has the potential to greatly improve broadcast signal reception, and it will enable broadcasters to offer enhanced and innovative new features. The NPRM proposes to let broadcasters deploy ATSC 3.0 based transmissions on a voluntary basis and to limit any negative effects on consumers and industry stakeholders. Among other matters, the NPRM proposes to let broadcasters use the ATSC 3.0 and to incorporate by reference the relevant portions of the ATSC 3.0 standard into the Commission's rules. It proposes to require local simulcasting for stations that choose to deploy next-gen TV transmissions so that viewers continue to receive signals that are compatible with current-generation TVs. Under our proposal, next-gen TV stations would be required to broadcast in both ATSC 3.0 and ATSC 1.0 simultaneously. It proposes to require MVPDs, cable operators, satellite providers, to continue to carry broadcasters' ATSC 1.0 signals, but not require them to carry ATSC 3.0 signals. We also seek comment on issues related to the voluntary carriage of ATSC 3.0 signals through the retransmission consent process. It seeks comment on whether next-gen TV service raises any interference concerns for existing DTV operations and for any other services, among other interference issues. And it seeks comment on a tentative conclusion that it is unnecessary at this time to adopt an ATSC 3.0 tuner mandate for new television receivers. Taken together, these proposals start the rulemaking process to enable private sector innovation and promote American leadership in the television broadcast industry. The Media Bureau recommends that the Commission adopt this NPRM and requests editorial privileges to make any necessary technical or conforming edits.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. We certainly miss Mr. Baranoff, but that was a heck of a pinch-hitting effort on your part. I will now turn to comments from the bench, starting with Commissioner Clyburn.
After World War I, broadcast began to play a prominent role in our lives, Eric Baranoff wrote in the opening pages of that 1966 industry classic, A Tower in Babel, A History of Broadcasting in the United States. I hope he's not here. As more stations went on the air, growing numbers of consumers could count on being able to receive over-the-air signals for free. This democratized access to information, ensuring that anyone with a radio or a television with an over-the-air antenna could receive local news, weather, and emergency information. More recently, thanks in part to the digital television transition, over-the-air television viewing is on the rise. This trend is particularly true, according to market researcher GfK, in households earning under $30,000 per year and those with Hispanic residents. Given my long-held personal connection to broadcast media, few things would please me more than to be excited about the prospects of a voluntarily implemented next-generation standard and how it might enhance the consumer viewing experience. During my tour of the CES show floor last month, I had to remember what month this was. I learned more about the purported benefits of ATSC 3.0, including the availability to deliver 4K TV over the air, advanced emergency alerts, and improved over-the-air reception. And I am cautiously optimistic that with the capacity to carry more programming, any new standard could fulfill our goal of greater viewpoint diversity. And bless you over there. I don't want to forget my southern manners. But what this proposed rulemaking makes clear is that plenty of outstanding questions remain, particularly as it relates to consumers, pay TV providers, as well as broadcasters who choose not to upgrade to the new standard. Unlike the DTV transition, any migration to ATSC 3.0 will not have the benefit of a government-backed coupon program. This means complete assurances must be in place so that consumers will not be burdened with unwanted, unexpected costs. And for those without the means to upgrade, or others who choose not to transition, yet another unanswered question is, will they continue to receive high-definition programs through a 1.0 simulcast? Will the higher resolution carriage requirements of ATSC 3.0 come at the expense of channel placement for independent programmers? What about the popular subchannels made possible through the DTV transition? Will they continue to be simulcast in 1.0? I am pleased, though, that the NPRM confirms that broadcasters' public interest obligations, including the required numbers of hours of video description and children's programming, should apply independently to both the ATSC 3.0 transmission and a station's 1.0 stream. I also have concerns about the possibility of the assessment of fees on a service that is accessed through the use of the public airwaves. Will consumers without internet access be at a disadvantage when it comes to this technology? I ask these questions and more because just as industry asks for and expects regulatory certainty from us, consumers want and deserve regulatory certainty from us too. They expect the signal that has served them well for decades to be the one they can continue to rely on for years to come. And despite being a voluntary transition, the NPRM fails to give consumers a defined commitment to maintaining 1.0 service and instead punts this to a future proceeding. It is important that over the course of any transition, broadcasters, particularly smaller stations that may not be able to bear the cost or simply do not see the business case for upgrading, that they know they will not be harmed. It is also critical that others in the video marketplace, including pay TV providers, not be disadvantaged if they choose not to carry ATSC 3.0 signals, and I am pleased that the final item invites comments on these issues. Finally, consumer education simply has to be a critical part of this transition. The NPRM devotes just 3 short paragraphs to questions about on-air notice to consumers compared to the massive education campaign associated with the DTV transition. Consumers will no doubt have many questions, particularly given that stations making the transition will do so at different times and in some cases not at all. So we need to be prepared to make an investment, both internally within this commission and through the efforts of broadcasters to ensure that consumers understand their options. Regrettably, the questions I posed about consumer education, including whether there should be a plan developed by broadcasters, they were not included in the final item. Quite frankly, I still have many questions, and plenty concerns remain. But I will support moving this proceeding forward to allow a robust record to be built. My thanks go to the Media Bureau and Office of Engineering and Technology for launching today's item. By maintaining a consumer's first focus, transitions and migrations can be win-wins for consumers and broadcasters alike.
Thank you, Commissioner Clyburn. Commissioner O'Reilly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, the recent development of spectrum uses in the U.S. overall has been characterized by experimentation, leading to amazing breakthroughs in capabilities and efficiency. Broadcasters have been relatively locked in by their existing transmission standard developed over 20 years ago. Today, the Commission opens the door to innovation, allowing interested broadcasters to move forward with plans to introduce ATSC 3.0 in content on the marketplace. The item before us is the next step in the overall process, with finalization hopefully by Halloween. Ultimately, consumers will determine the future of television broadcasting, and I think there will be a lot of them to like what they see in the new standard, or the subset of standards, as is the case here, to the extent that broadcasters adopt and deploy these technologies. The availability of internet and over-the-top content has allowed consumers to become ever more accustomed to increasingly more personalized and localized information and entertainment that can be accessed anywhere and anytime. ATSC 3.0 may allow broadcasters to compete much more efficiently with their own customized content, available to a much greater extent on mobile devices, not just TV sets. And the unparalleled picture and audio quality made possible by the standard will likely be in high demand. While teeing up all of the important questions about the effects of ATSC 3.0 could have on every aspect of our content distribution system, this item appropriately makes clear that any use of the new standard will be completely voluntary for all participants, broadcasters, distributors, and consumers alike. Similarly, I am particularly interested in learning what exactly commenters believe we absolutely must include in our rules regarding ATSC 3.0, because I want to leave as much flexibility as possible for the industry to innovate and change in the future to meet consumer demands. Ultimately, I'd like it to be next to nothing, just as it is with regards to how we handle the latest wireless standard. Along those lines, any suggestions for mandates governing a potential future transition would be premature, in my opinion. I appreciate the Chairman's willingness to accommodate my suggestions to clarify that this is an experiment and we need to see how the market reacts before moving any further ahead. And I thank the staff for their hard work on this matter. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Reilly. Imagine a world in which TV broadcasts of your favorite show or news program were delivered in ultra-high definition and immersive audio. Imagine a world in which programming content was hyper-localized and broadcasters could deliver niche content to specific geographic areas within a station's signal area. Imagine a world that offered Americans with disabilities far better accessibility options for experiencing broadcast television. Imagine a world in which every consumer smartphone could serve as an over-the-air programming device, allowing viewership on the go. And imagine a world in which our emergency alert system was far more advanced, tailoring alerts to particular neighborhoods and waking up sleeping devices to warn consumers of imminent emergencies. This world need not be imaginary with the advent of next-generation television broadcasting. The technical standard that would deliver these benefits, as you have heard, is known as ATSC 3.0. Many broadcasters are itching to develop and implement it in order to better serve American consumers, but they need our permission to do that. Well, today we take the first step toward bringing the next generation of television broadcasting to the United States. Specifically, in today's notice of proposed rulemaking, we propose to allow television broadcasters to use ATSC 3.0 on a voluntary, market-driven basis. In doing so, we aim to enable broadcast innovation and to promote American leadership in the global broadcasting industry. Why does this matter? Well, TV broadcasting remains an indispensable part of our nation's communications landscape. Indeed, most of our nation's television's biggest events and highest rated shows are still on broadcast TV. Just over 2.5 weeks ago, over 111 million people and 70% of U.S. households using TV tuned in to watch the Super Bowl over the air on Fox. And I understand that 98% of them wonder still why the Falcons didn't run 3 times on the 22-yard line. And most importantly, when wireless networks go dark or internet access is disrupted, people still turn to their local broadcasters for life-saving information. But in the digital age, television broadcasting is capable of doing more, so much more. Indeed, the ATSC 3.0 standard appears to have enormous potential. It's the first transmission standard to marry the advantages of broadcasting with the internet. And it's based on the Internet Protocol, or IP, which will permit seamless integration with other IP-based services and platforms. ATSC 3.0 also has the ability to deliver many new features, like the ones I mentioned earlier. Importantly, we are also asking the public to help us assess the impact of broadcasters' voluntary deployment of the next generation transmission standard on consumers, on cable and direct broadcast satellite companies, and broadcasters themselves. For instance, it is important for the FCC to facilitate innovation, but we should also minimize any disruption to consumers that could result from the voluntary implementation of the new standard. And that's why, among other things, we propose to require that broadcasters that choose to transmit their signal in ATSC 3.0 format from their current facilities arrange for another station in their market to simulcast their programming using the current standard, ATSC 1.0. That way, over-the-air viewers who don't have ATSC 3.0 capable equipment won't be left in the dark. We are, as my colleagues have mentioned, in debt to the dedicated Commission staff who worked so diligently on this notice. From the Media Bureau, I'd like to thank the erstwhile Evan Baranoff, Kathy Berthott, Stephen Brokert, Michelle Carey, John Gabrish, Martha Heller, Kim Matthews, and Brendan Murray. And from the Office of Engineering and Technology, thanks to the illustrious chief, Mr. Julie Knapp, the indispensable engineer, Martin Dockskat, Matt Hussey, and Paul Murray, as well as Barbara Pavon. Your joint efforts in getting us to this point are much appreciated. Working together, I hope that we can issue final authorization of this new standard no later than the end of this year, so that American broadcasters can deliver to our nation's citizens even more of the marvels of the digital age. With that, we will move to a vote on the item. Commissioner Clyburn?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Reilly?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye as well. The ayes have it, so ordered with editorial privileges granted for technical and conforming edits. Madam Secretary, if you could please announce the next item on today's agenda.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, the next item on your agenda will also be presented by the Media Bureau and is entitled Revitalization of the AM Radio Service. And Michelle Carey, Acting Chief of the Media Bureau, again will give the introduction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, the Media Bureau next presents a second report and order that would change the current rule defining where an FM translator rebroadcasting the signal of an AM radio station may be located. We believe that the proposed change would give AM broadcasters added flexibility in providing their audiences with robust reception service, and would reduce regulatory burdens on such broadcasters without adversely affecting the public interest. It would also build on the first report and order in this proceeding, in which the Commission took steps towards revitalizing the AM broadcast band. Joining me at the table are Peter Doyle, Lisa Scanlon, Jim Bradshaw, and Tom Nessinger of the Audio Division. Tom will present the item.
Thank you.
Morning, Mr. Chairman. Morning, Commissioners. We are pleased to present this second report and order that continues the Commission's efforts to revitalize AM radio and to give AM broadcasters more flexibility to serve their communities. In 2009, the Commission allowed AM broadcast stations to rebroadcast their signals over FM translator stations, providing fill-in service to parts of the AM station's coverage areas. This enabled AM stations, in many cases, to offer the first 24-hour service to portions of their service areas, as many AM stations must reduce power at night. The current rule, introduced in 2009, provides that the coverage contour of such a cross-service FM translator must be contained within the lesser of the AM station's 2 millivolt per meter daytime contour or a 25-mile radius from the AM transmitter. Over 900 AM stations took advantage of this rule, and in the first report and order in this AM revitalization proceeding, the Commission expanded opportunities for such service by ordering 2 filing windows, opened in 2016, in which AM licensees could apply to acquire and relocate FM translators to rebroadcast their signals. Over 1,000 applications for such translator relocations have been granted, and a similar response is anticipated to the upcoming auction filing windows for new FM cross-service translators, which was also mandated by the Commission. Many commenters in the AM revitalization proceeding had noted that the current rule for citing FM cross-service translators was often unduly restrictive. This is especially true for stations whose transmitters must be located far from their communities due to land costs, or whose signals are highly directionalized. Thus, these commenters requested that the Commission change the rule so that a cross-service translator's coverage area could be located now within the greater of the AM station's 2 millivolt per meter service contour or a 25-mile radius from the transmitter. The Commission proposed this amended rule in the further notice of proposed rulemaking, and commenters overwhelmingly supported the change, which would provide AM broadcasters with expanded options for locating or relocating cross-service translators. Although the initial proposal limited the translator's signal to no more than 40 miles from the AM transmitter, some commenters sought extension or elimination of this limit, seeking coverage of populations that fall within the AM station's service contour but more than 40 miles from the transmitter. Because the Commission has stated that the 2 millivolt per meter contour constitutes an AM station service contour, it is believed that the 40-mile limit was unnecessary to ensure coverage of an AM station's core market, and so the 40-mile limitation has been eliminated from the rule change set forth in this second report and order. This proposal is timely because of the large number of cross-service translators that have already been acquired and that will be acquired by AM broadcasters as a result of the Commission's first report and order in this proceeding. The Media Bureau therefore recommends that the Commission adopt this second report and order, and we request privileges to make any necessary technical and conforming edits. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nessinger. I will turn to comments from the bench. Commissioner Clyburn.
It is often said that AM radio is a foundational part of the American media landscape. Its programming, which ranges from news, sports, and talk to rather agricultural reports, and of course, music, continues to educate, inspire, and bring communities together. One of my proudest moments as acting chair was helping to shepherd one of the Commission's recent efforts to revitalize AM broadcasting. As a result of our agency's ongoing reforms, as you heard last year, we received over 1,000 applications from broadcasters seeking to relocate FM translators for AM rebroadcast use. With today's second report in order, we build on that accomplishment by instituting what to some may seem a minor change in our rules. But by slightly relaxing where a fill-in translator can locate, we enhance flexibility for broadcasters, making it easier for applicants to serve their local communities. Implementing this proposal, prior to the opening of the 2017 auction windows, should be welcome news to both broadcasters and listeners across the nation. As we seek to modernize AM radio, we must not forget about low-power FM stations and their unique role in serving local and or underrepresented groups. This report in order reiterates that any translator station relocating based on the amended rule must still protect any LP-FM stations under the contour protections outlined in the Commission's existing rules. I will be watching closely to ensure our AM modernization efforts do not unintentionally undermine the phenomenal success story that is LP-FM. So once again, hats off to the Media Bureau's audio division staff, including Peter Doyle, Lisa Scanlon, renaming you, sorry about that, Jim Bradshaw, Tom Nessinger, for your continued efforts to modernize a medium that then Commerce Secretary Herbert Hoover sagely recognized in 1922 as being one of the most astonishing things that has come under my observation of American life. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Clyburn. Pulling out the Hoover. Very nice.
Yeah, it's supposed to President's Day, right?
Exactly.
But not many people reference Hoover.
Yeah. Commissioner O'Reilly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to pass on a formal statement related to the underlying item and just make an observation. This item is one of two the Chairman released to the public and press at the same time it was circulated to commissioners. As a report and order versus an NPRM, it provides more information on the effects of the process reform itself. And telling note, the world didn't end. The earth is still round and revolves around the sun, contrary to some beliefs. And the Commission can do its work while improving overall transparency and accountability for the American people. I look forward to the end of the pilot project and this practice becoming standard procedure in the very near future. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Reilly. I certainly hope there's not a meteor heading for the FCC as we speak. But
there's not a big coffee mug here, so I'm waiting for like.
I know I've got a cold myself, so I can't. I can't do it today. But last year, over 1,000 AM radio stations acquired FM translators as a result of the Commission's AM radio revitalization initiative, which Acting Chairwoman Clyburn was instrumental in a few years ago. The stations benefiting from our initiative represent the diversity and localism that you find on the AM band around this country. For example, FM translators went to a Shawnee, Oklahoma station owned by the Citizen Potawatomi Nation, as well as a student-run station at the University of Colorado in Boulder. And then there's WBTC AM in Yorksville, Ohio, which switched on its FM translator last 4th of July, just in time for its owner's 98th birthday. Among other things, the station, which has been owned by local resident James Natoli since 1963, broadcasts local news, sports, a program called Dial and Deal, where listeners can buy and sell items, and Dial and Speak, the only call-in show in all of Tuscarawas County. Our efforts thus far to make it easier for AM broadcasters like these to obtain FM translators have been a tremendous success. But we've also heard, as Mr. Nessinger pointed out, that the Commission's rule setting forth where an FM fill-in translator that is rebroadcasting an AM broadcast station may be cited is too restrictive and has blocked some AM broadcasters from being able to purchase a translator. That's why in 2014, the Commission sought comment on a proposal to relax this rule. And that's why we are moving ahead today and changing it. The specifics of the rule change involve technical jargon that I suspect only broadcast engineers could understand, but the real-world impact of this order is pretty simple. It will now be easier for AM stations to find a suitable location for their FM translators. And that, in turn, will make it much easier for AM broadcasters to serve their local communities, especially at night. I, too, would like to thank the terrific staff of the Media Bureau, Michelle Carey, Jim Bradshaw, Peter Doyle, Tom Nessinger, and Lisa Scanlon for your excellent work on this item. And more generally, thanks to the Audio Division for fielding my seemingly never-ending inquiries about radio over the years. It is a labor of love for me, as I know it is for you, too, and American listeners and broadcasters alike are so grateful for your efforts. You know, I've said many times before that when it comes to promoting localism, competition, and diversity, and otherwise serving the public interest, that AM radio matters. It is a vital part of our nation's communications infrastructure, and thanks in part to our action here today, I hope it thrives in the years to come. With that, we will proceed to a vote on this item. Commissioner Clyburn.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Reilly.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye as well. The ayes have it, so ordered. The item is adopted with editorial privileges granted for technical and conforming edits. Thanks to all of you. Madam Secretary, please announce the next agenda. the agenda for today.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, the next item on your agenda will be presented by the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau and is entitled Small Business Exemption from Open Internet Enhanced Transparency Requirements. And Allison Cutler, Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Ms. Cutler, whenever you're ready, please proceed.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners.
Good morning.
Today I'm pleased to introduce an item that provides relief to smaller broadband internet access service providers. The item relieves smaller providers from the enhanced reporting requirements adopted in the Title II order in light of significant concerns from these providers about the disproportionate compliance costs. This relief frees smaller provider resources that can be used for deploying broadband. The Title II order adopted these enhanced reporting requirements and granted an immediate temporary exemption to many of the same providers covered by this item before you. Following a limited extension of the original exemption, the item before you now provides longer-term relief to those same providers for 5 years and extends the relief to all broadband providers serving 250,000 or fewer broadband connections. With me at the table today are Kurt Schroeder, Chief of CGB's Consumer Policy Division, John B. Adams, Deputy Chief of the Consumer Policy Division, and Karen Schroeder, no relation to Kurt, an honors attorney in the Consumer Policy Division. And a special thank you to the Office of General Counsel for their work with us on this item. Karen will now present the item.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners.
Good morning.
The item before you grants broadband internet access service providers with 250,000 or fewer broadband connections a waiver of the enhanced reporting requirements adopted in the Title II order. The waiver granted to covered providers will be effective for 5 years. Granting this relief frees resources smaller providers would have to devote to reporting requirements, resources that could be used to operate, improve, and build out their broadband networks. The item thus furthers the Commission's critical goal of promoting investment in and deployment of broadband infrastructure. In the Title II order, the Commission adopted certain enhancements to the 2010 reporting requirements that govern the content and format of disclosures made by broadband providers. At the same time, the Commission responded to the concerns of smaller providers by temporarily exempting from the enhanced requirements those providers with 100,000 or fewer broadband subscribers. But the Commission further noted that the exemption, including the eligibility threshold, required additional deliberation. It directed the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau to consider whether the exemption should be extended, and if so, whether the eligibility threshold of 100,000 broadband connections was appropriate going forward. As directed, the Bureau sought comment on these issues. Several commenters, including broadband providers, supported the exemption for smaller providers, with most saying that the compliance burdens on smaller providers are disproportionately high because of their limited resources. In December 2015, the Bureau extended the temporary exemption in anticipation of the Commission considering whether, and if so how, to best address burdens imposed on smaller providers by the enhanced requirements. The exemption expired this past December, causing smaller providers concern about devoting substantial resources to complying. The item before you responds to those concerns and gives smaller providers predictability by granting them a 5-year waiver. The waiver applies to the period beginning on January 17, 2017, when the rules took effect, and ending 5 years after adoption. The waiver extends relief to providers with 250,000 or fewer broadband connections. This threshold is the same as the threshold contained in bipartisan legislation that has passed the House and is now being considered in the Senate. The item finds that the public interest in preventing unnecessary compliance costs for smaller providers provides the Commission with a compelling basis for this waiver of the enhanced reporting requirements. We recommend adoption of this item and request editorial privileges to make technical and conforming edits. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schroeder and Ms. Cutler. We'll turn to comments from the bench. Commissioner Clyburn.
In an ongoing quest to dismantle basic consumer protections for broadband services, the majority has decided to exempt billion-dollar public companies from being transparent with consumers. This represents yet another series of steps being taken to jettison pro-consumer initiatives, and we should not stand silent as consumer protections go gentle into that good night. If you have not picked up on it already, I must respectfully dissent from today's order. From the beginning of the open internet proceeding, I have been consistent in my commitment to ensuring that our nation's smallest broadband service providers are not unduly burdened by the enhancements to our transparency rule. Indeed, I champion an exemption from the enhanced transparency rule included in the Commission's 2015 Open Internet Order. And 2 months ago, I voted to protect small providers with 100,000 or fewer subscribers when the small provider exemption was on the precipice of lapsing. But in late January, the newly constituted commission proposed a vastly different order than what had been on circulation for several months. In the interest of finding common ground, I made multiple attempts at compromise as late as yesterday afternoon. But I could not compromise on having consumers clearly know the price they pay for service, what below-the-line fees are charged, and what data allowances apply to their broadband service. We have been criticized in the past for not basing our decisions on facts. Well, if that were true, then very little has changed. While my colleagues describe this order as a reflection of congressional intent, one of the Small Business Broadband Deployment Act's original co-sponsors, Representative Dave Loebsack, described the bill as giving, and I quote, the FCC flexibility to find a more tailored solution that best balances the needs of consumers with the needs of small businesses. Despite this statement, the order we adopt today contains no analysis, no tailored solution, and in fact does not even mention the American consumer at all. If we were to actually conduct an analysis, we would find the claims of burdensome regulation lacking. Our original exemption was based on our actions in the rule called completion context, and the instant order cites with approval comments that seem to suggest the transparency rule is stupendously more burdensome than our rule called completion requirements, so let us compare the two proceedings. In assessing the burden of complying with our rule called completion information collection, the Office of Management and Budget determined that compliance would take each long-distance provider 64 hours annually. There, the Commission exempted providers with 100,000 or fewer subscriber lines. On the other hand, OMB determined that compliance with the enhancements to the transparency rule would take each broadband provider 6.8 hours annually. Yet we're minutes away from exempting providers with 250,000 or fewer with 250,000 connections, including billion-dollar public companies, while claiming that the rules are burdensome regulation of small internet service providers. In other words, the order doubles down here by allowing the biggest providers in this country to exempt their subsidiaries that have under 250,000 connections. You see, many of the nation's largest broadband providers are actually holding companies comprised of many smaller operating companies. So what today's order does is exempt these companies' affiliates that have under 250,000 connections by declining to aggregate the connection count at the holding company level. And if all of that were not enough, the order runs roughshod over past precedent with no discussion as to why the Commission is changing its mind. Twice, the Commission found 100,000 connections to be the right number, but today you will not find any rational discussion as to why this cutoff has been revisited. Burdens that the Commission discounted in the past are now given credence without evaluating why prior decisions are being jettisoned. And most importantly, there is absolutely no evaluation of the impact the exemption will have on consumers. There is also a bigger issue at play because the enhanced transparency rules are just one aspect of the open internet rules adopted by the Commission in 2015. These rules were adopted to prevent broadband providers from blocking, throttling, favoring, or discriminating against traffic or exacting tolls from any user for any reason or for no reason at all. And at a time when the majority on this commission is talking about gutting these broader rules, I cannot in good conscience support this vastly increased exemption without knowing what core protections will remain in place for consumers and small businesses in the years to come. As I close, my single request today is a simple one, that this commission and those internet service providers put consumers first. If you and your companies have the resources, then do the right thing. Be transparent with your consumers about what prices you charge, what fees you assess, what data caps you propose, and your network performance practices. Your customers, I am confident, will thank you. Now, while I cannot support this item, I must acknowledge and thank the diligent staff of the Consumer and Government Affairs Bureau for their years of toil on this issue. You have worked with me when I first requested this exemption years ago, and you have been nothing but professional and helpful ever since. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Clyburn. Commissioner O'Reilly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This item establishes a sensible and soundly justifiable exemption for small internet service providers from unnecessary and expensive so-called enhanced transparency reporting mandates. It sets the threshold at a reasonable level of 250,000 broadband customers, which is a lower number than many, including myself, would have preferred. Some may try to critique the threshold level as too generous or excluding too many broadband companies. The arguments ultimately fail for numerous reasons. It is important to note that the item conforms to compromises contained in both bipartisan House and Senate legislation on the topic. On that point, the respective legislation passed the House by voice vote, meaning every Republican and Democratic supported it. If any single member of the House had any objection, they were free to raise it, but they did not. Well, some complain that too few subjects can find common ground in such a legislatively charged environment. This bill did, and did so spectacularly. Again, bipartisan approval was had on a voice vote. Admittedly, House passage alone does not make law, but it does provide a very good indication that the level we are seeking is exceptionally rational. In terms of substance, the Commission previously approved a level of 100,000 subscribers. Thus, any disagreement with this item is really over exempting those companies between 100 and 250,000. But the data shows that only approximately 17 total wireline and wireless companies nationwide have customer levels between these 2 points, and none with vast coverage areas or market share. So this is far, far from providing big broadband companies with an exemption. Moreover, no one has been able to make a viable case as to why any of these specific companies that fall between 100 and 250 subscriber thresholds are so different or have distinguishable features to justify disparate treatment or these added burdens. Similarly, the argument may be made that absent these reporting requirements, consumers of small ISPs will be without necessary information to make a thoughtful decision. In essence, they argue that consumers will ultimately be hoodwinked into becoming subscribers. This is pure hyperbole. Smaller ISPs generally make much, if not all, of the commercially available data points freely and openly available to prospective customers. What they rightfully object to is the Commission's heavy-handed and expensive data collecting and reporting mandates, including the specific and specified form of disclosure and specific deadlines. In the end, this is a balanced effort to find an acceptable and defensible landing spot. But to be clear, it does not address a far more fundamental matter, whether these reporting requirements should exist at all. That will have to wait for another day in the near future. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Reilly. 2 months ago, the small business exemption from the expanded reporting requirements in the Title II order expired. That lapse left thousands of our nation's smallest and most competitive internet service providers, mom-and-pop wireless internet service providers, or WISPs, small cable operators, municipal broadband providers, electric cooperatives, rural telephone companies, and others, worried that they would be subject to unnecessary, onerous, and ill-defined reporting obligations. Today, we are taking action to exempt small businesses from these burdensome requirements that impose serious and unnecessary costs on providers. I'm particularly pleased that we do so consistent with the bipartisan compromise reflected in the Small Business Broadband Deployment Act of 2017, which unanimously passed the House earlier this year. To be sure, we would have preferred bipartisan agreement here at this agency as well. And that is why yesterday we offered a compromise to address Congressman Loebsack's suggestion. Regrettably, that offer was turned down. Nonetheless, our decision today will help the country's smaller providers, namely those with 250 or 1,000 or fewer broadband subscribers, better serve their communities. For I firmly believe that these ISPs should spend their limited capital building out better broadband to rural America, not hiring lawyers and accountants to fill out unnecessary paperwork demanded by Washington, D.C. With this action, the small businesses that are critical to injecting competition into the broadband marketplace will be better able to do just that. I would like to thank John B. Adams, Micah Caldwell, Allison Cutler, Karen Schroeder, Kurt Schroeder, no relation, and Mark Stone from the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, as well as Rick Mallon and Bill Richardson from the Office of General Counsel for their hard work on this order and their continued dedication to the public interest. And we will now proceed to a vote on the item. Commissioner Clyburn?
Nay.
Commissioner O'Reilly?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. The ayes have it. The item is adopted, so ordered, with editorial privileges for technical and conforming edits granted. Thank you to the staff. And Madam Secretary, if you could please announce the next item on today's agenda.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, the sixth and final item on your agenda will be presented by the Wireline Competition Bureau, and it is entitled Comprehensive Review of the Part 32 Uniform System of Accounts. And Chris Monteith, Acting Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
With a title that appealing, how could anyone resist? Ms. Monteith, please proceed whenever your staff is situated.
Good morning again, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. The Wireline Competition Bureau is pleased to present for your consideration a report and order in the Part 32 proceeding. The item before you takes the first major step in years towards reforming the Part 32 Uniform System of Accounts. For example, the item would reduce burdens and costs associated with the current Part 32 framework by minimizing obligations for certain regulated telephone companies to maintain two sets of accounting books, one for financial reporting and one for regulatory accounting purposes. It would also amend numerous rules to streamline the accounting process for all carriers and expand accounting options for price cap carriers. These reforms will provide all carriers with the ability to better allocate scarce resources for the expansion of modern networks. I would like to thank the entire Part 32 team, including staff not only from the Wireline Competition Bureau, but also from the Office of General Counsel, the Enforcement Bureau, and the Office of Managing Director, for their tireless work on this proceeding. Seated at the table with me are Pam Arlock, Chief of WCB's Pricing and Policy Division, Robin Cohn, Assistant Division Chief of the Pricing Policy Division, and Marv Sachs, Attorney Advisor in the Pricing Policy Division. Robin will present the item.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners.
Good morning.
The report in order before you would make significant revisions to the Commission's Part 32 Uniform System of Accounts to substantially reduce accounting burdens for both price cap and rate of return carriers. The item would take the following specific steps, which fall into three categories. First, the item would streamline Part 32 for price cap and rate of return carriers in many respects. The item would eliminate the current classification of carriers, and all carriers would be required to keep only streamlined Class B accounts. In addition, Part 32 would be aligned more closely with generally accepted accounting principles, or GAAP. In this regard, all carriers would be allowed to carry an asset at its purchase price when it was acquired, even if its value has increased or declined when it goes into regulated service. Would be allowed to reprice an asset at market value after a merger or acquisition, would use GAAP principles to determine allowance for funds used during construction, or AFUDC, and would employ the gap standard of materiality, and for carriers receiving cost-based support, materiality would be determined consistent with the general materiality guidelines promulgated by the Auditing Standards Board. Further, the item would revise Part 32 to require price cap carriers to maintain continuing property records necessary to track substantial assets and investments in an accurate, auditable manner. Second, the item would allow price cap carriers to use GAAP for all regulatory accounting purposes as long as they comply with targeted accounting rules. This choice would be subject to a commitment to mitigate any impact the election would have on poll attachment rates. Price cap carriers who choose this option would be required to take the following 2 steps. Establish an implementation rate difference, which is the difference between the poll attachment rates calculated by the price cap carrier under Part 32 and under GAAP as of the last full year preceding the carrier's initial opting out of Part 32 accounting requirements, and adjust their annually computed GAAP-based rates by the implementation rate difference for a period of 12 years after the election. As a second alternative, price cap carriers could elect to use GAAP accounting for all purposes other than those associated with poll attachment rates and continue to use the Part 32 accounts and procedures applicable to poll attachment rates for up to 12 years. At this point, such price cap carriers would move to setting poll attachment rates under GAAP using the implementation rate difference approach for the remaining portion of the 12 years after they have chosen to move to GAAP accounting. In addition, to facilitate transparency in the transition of poll attachment rate setting from Part 32 to GAAP, a poll attacher may request that a price cap carrier submit its accounting data for a particular state to the Commission for a 3-year period following the effective date of the rules. This would assist the parties and the Commission in monitoring and evaluating any rate changes. Third, the item addresses the following 4 issues. It finds that Part 32 data is unnecessary to ensure compliance with Section 254K of the Communications Act, which prohibits a telecommunications carrier from using services that are not competitive to subsidize services that are subject to competition. It forbears from the continued application of Section 272E3 imputation requirements. It terminates conditions that the Commission placed on a variety of carriers granted forbearance from cost allocation rules. And finally, it refers to the Federal-State Joint Board on Separations, the issue of examining jurisdictional separations rules in light of the reforms adopted to Part 32. The actions we propose today represent a significant step in streamlining and eliminating outdated accounting rules that are no longer needed for the Commission to fulfill its statutory and regulatory duties while substantially reducing compliance burdens for carriers. The Bureau recommends adoption of this report and order and requests editorial privileges extending only to technical and conforming edits. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cohn. We will now proceed to comments from the bench. Commissioner Clyburn.
Until today, Section 220 of the Communications Act required all regulated telephone companies to keep their accounting books in a uniform manner. This in and of itself is not an unusual condition, for there are many other industries, both regulated and unregulated, that use this system of uniformity to include hotels, restaurants, marinas, and boatyards. Even the destination marketing industry, yes, that is a real term, Mr. Chair, has a uniform system of accounts that diverges in certain respects from generally accepted accounting principles or GAAP. So it is worth mentioning that price cap telephone companies ask to be exempt from an accounting system that many other industries readily employ to ensure uniformity. But we have met at this juncture before. When first faced with whether to forbear from requiring this data in 2013, I agree that forbearance was unwarranted and that it is also worth mentioning that the Commission's view was upheld by the Court. The mere existence of data can act as an insurance policy against bad behavior, and today we are canceling that policy. So I'm concerned that we're acting too soon. While the majority cites our reforms of intercarrier compensation as justification for no longer needing uniform bookkeeping, we are still years away from bill and keep for terminating access charges. And I might note that the Commission has yet to reform originating access charges. I also fear that our action will be cited to our state counterparts as the main reason why they will no longer need a uniform system of accounts in their state regulatory structure. Just as we've seen state legislatures regulate in the face of promises that federal rules will impact or protect consumers, federal regulation has also been used to leverage state deregulation. Let me say that again. Just as we have seen state legislatures deregulate in the face of promises that federal rules will protect consumers, federal deregulation has also been used to leverage state deregulation. This is especially problematic here, where the lack of a federal need does not equate to a lack of a state need for such regulation. In fact, quite the opposite is true. Let me be clear. I believe it is high time we reform Part 32 of our rules, the section dealing with uniform accounting, streamlining the number of accounts, allowing carriers to reprice assets at market value after a transaction, and incorporating the concept of materiality into accounting practices, for example, are good ideas that I am glad we are implementing. And since accounting for costs related to pole attachments are still critically relevant, regardless of what accounting method is used, I am pleased that we act to make sure that data regarding pole costs remain transparent and easily accessible for several years. I only wish we could have gone further to protect attachers from rate shock, as this may happen as pole owners switch to GAAP accounting. Yes, today's action will provide bookkeeping flexibility to price cap carriers. However, the result of these changes will be less uniformity and certainty going forward, which in turn may mean comparing apples to oranges when we look at carrier costs. And because I am not wholly convinced that we are completely free of the need for this data in the future, I respectfully concur in part. So to those carriers who advocate for decreased regulatory burdens, let me assure you, I am with you. However, the next time this commission or a state commission asks for cost data to support a rulemaking, investigate a complaint, or bring an enforcement action, I hope we do not hear protestations that the request is too burdensome because the data is not kept in the format that the FCC or state commission needs. To the staff of the Wireline Bureau, I again thank you for all your hard work on this item, as well as your efforts over the years in implementing uniform system of accounts. And Mr. Chairman, allow me to thank my advisor, Claude Aiken. He has had a very significant portfolio burden this time, so including the Bureau. I would like to thank him for his hard work.
Absolutely. Thank you, Commissioner Clyburn. Commissioner O'Reilly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This order takes an important first step to reduce unnecessary regulation. For years, I have questioned the utility of requiring price cap carriers to keep two sets of accounts at significant expense, as marketplace and regulatory changes have substantially diminished the need for specialized accounting rules. While some wanted to simply consolidate and simplify, I pushed to find out why we couldn't scrap them altogether without harming our mission. When I met with staff in 2014, it quickly became apparent that the data required under our existing accounting system would only be used in extremely rare instances, if ever. And except for pole attachments, most of these potential uses were highly speculative. Indeed, it was apparently so rare that anyone who would review or rely on this data that we had to scour the commission to find staff that understood how to make sense of it, much less how to go about reforming it. In short, these requirements are like an old sweater that you keep in the back of your closet, haven't worn for years, and aren't sure it still fits, but continue to store it just in case it comes back into style. It's time to remove these accounting burdens, which no longer make sense in today's world. I hope to work with my colleagues and interested parties on other ideas to remove similarly situated, outdated burdens. For this reason, I also support an effort to review and eliminate unnecessary Part 36 jurisdictional separation requirements. For too long, the Commission has kicked the regulatory can down the road, hoping that our other reforms will ultimately remove the need for these rules as well. But with each passing year, there are fewer people that understand these arcane rules, and the substantive usefulness of these rules decreases precipitously. Therefore, we've reached a critical deregulatory opportunity. It only seems appropriate to overhaul our outdated separation regulations in a sensible way. While the referral to the Separations Joint Board in this item is a narrow one, as chair of the board, I am eager to take a broader view and look forward to working with my federal and state colleagues on more comprehensive reform. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Reilly. Although on personal privilege, I have to say your fashion comments hit a little close to home. Pepe jeans will come back someday, I'm convinced. The recovering English majors in the audience will surely recall Percy Bysshe Shelley's famous poem, Ozymandias. And in Ozymandias, as you remember, the author presents two trunkless legs standing in the desert, the remains of a formerly grand statue depicting a once important king. On a pedestal, the famous inscription states, "Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair." Well, the Part 32 accounts are the Commission's Ozymandias, once an important tool that touched every corner of the telecommunications industry, and once so grand that even the mightiest accountants despaired. The Part 32 accounts now affect only a small and shrinking portion of the marketplace in this era of intermodal competition. And they are, for many, nothing more than archaic relics of our regulatory history. And so it is that we take a common sense step today to remove regulations that have long since outlived their usefulness. For years, price cap carriers essentially have had to keep two sets of books, one for financial reporting and one for regulatory reporting. This was because many regulatory functions involving monopolies required systematically reported data in a way that didn't necessarily reflect well a company's financial position for non-regulatory purposes. As I explained years ago when we kicked off this proceeding, the FCC first adopted detailed accounting rules for telephone companies in the 1930s, when command and control was the preferred approach to regulation and legal monopolies dominated. But since the passage of the Telecommunications Act of 1996, competition has blossomed, and our Part 32 accounting rules now apply to a small and shrinking percentage of the market. There is simply no need to continue requiring these and only these carriers to waste time and money keeping two different sets of books. Now, this is especially important because every dollar used to comply with the FCC's outdated regulations is, by definition, a dollar that cannot be used to build 21st century networks. And the money involved here is not chump change. The record suggests that some carriers have been spending millions of dollars each year to comply with the Part 32 accounting rules. And to me, that represents potentially thousands, if not more, American consumers who could have been digitally connected. It's also important to note that removing these requirements will not impair in the least the government's ability to discharge its duties. Recently, we asked the Bureau's staff to determine how often of late the FCC actually used the Part 32 data for price cap carriers. The staff responded that it was not aware of any federal reliance on this data in the last 5 years. In addition, the Bureau said that going forward, none of the changes in this order would prevent them from having the necessary accounting data to carry out any of the agency's statutory responsibilities. So let all that sink in for just a moment. For at least half a decade, the FCC has been mandating that carriers devote scarce resources to accounting paperwork that the Commission doesn't even need or use. This is the telecom equivalent of the government levying a tax and the IRS then burning the money. A coda on policy. The possible impact of our action today on pole attachment rates has received some attention. But a change in accounting methodology doesn't affect what costs are included in pole attachment rates, but only when they are recognized. The solution we adopt today mitigates any rate shock, and moreover, the Commission will monitor pole attachment rates and will take appropriate action should the need arise. For as I made clear last September, as part of my digital empowerment agenda, competitive pole attachment rates are important if we want more affordable broadband and more competition. And that's a topic that we will discuss further, I'm sure, in the time to come. I, too, like my colleagues, would like to thank the staff of the FCC who have worked so hard on this order. To say the least, judging from Ms. Cohn's presentation, understanding and modernizing these rules are not tasks for the faint of heart, nor is explaining them, as our poor interpreter can tell you, given her experience over the last few minutes. I'm impressed. I know that look. I'm impressed by and grateful for the deep expertise that the Commission has drawn upon in addressing these matters. And so thank you to Pam Arlick, to Robin Cohn, to Warren Furshine, Victoria Goldberg, Athula Gunaratna, Jane Jackson, Marv Sachs, Mika Severe, and Doug Slotin, as well as Chief Chris Monteith. I look upon your works, ye mighty, and I marvel. With that, we will proceed to a vote on the item. Commissioner Clyburn? Commissioner O'Reilly?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye as well. The ayes have it. The item is adopted with editorial privileges for technical and conforming edits extended. So ordered. Would any of my colleagues like to make announcements at this time? Commissioner just a quick few on my end. I wanted to note the sad passing of Mr. Thomas Wyatt. Tom passed away on February 12th of this year. He retired last year after a long and distinguished tenure here at the Federal Communications Commission, concluding in 2016 with his leadership of the Office of Workplace Diversity. He was a terrific FCC employee, and his successor, Larry Hudson, sent around a nice note observing as well that he had big shoes to fill. He will be missed, and his legacy lives on at this commission. I also wanted to note the departure of Carol Maddie, who I mentioned earlier in the context of our universal service items. And I don't know, I saw her here earlier. Is she still here? Backbenching. Very nice to see Carol. At her farewell party, I observed that he was sort of telling that her educational pedigree included stints at the University of Virginia and the University of Pennsylvania, the mascots of which I'm sure you're aware are the Cavaliers and the Quakers, because to be able to handle the high-cost issues that she's had to handle over the years, you have to be a warrior on one hand, but you also have to have an inner peace. And I used to love these briefings I would have when I was a commissioner with Carol, where she would come into my office and she would have a whole sheaf of papers, and she would sit down, and before she said anything, she would just exhale. And I just knew she'd been dealing with a lot. But she explained these concepts, very complicated and politically challenged concepts, in a way that was understandable to me, and at the end of the day was really important to the American consumer. We often think that the high cost is just an arcane set of regulations that no one can penetrate, and that might be true, but at the end of the day, what it means is delivering broadband for rural and low-income consumers, and that's such an important thing. So Carol, on behalf of the entire agency, we are so grateful to your service to the Commission. We wish you well in your future endeavors, and we are simply glad that for all too brief period of years, our paths crossed in these wireline fields. So thank you for all you've done. I also have one new announcement for our office. Miss Alex McLeod, who is not here, I think she's taking classes. She interned in our office last semester, and apparently she didn't get the message that we are a very difficult bunch to work with, so she volunteered to come back again, even in the absence of any football season. So Alex has done terrific work already in our office. We're very excited to have her back, and we're looking forward to working with her. If my colleagues don't have any further suggestions, Madam Secretary, please announce the date of the next FCC agenda meeting.
The next agenda meeting of the Federal Communications Commission is Thursday, March 23rd, 2017.
Thank you, and with that, we stand adjourned. All right. Oh, hey, how's it going? Oh, all right.
Are we? If we could get the room, could folks who take their conversations outside, please? We're about ready to begin the press conference. So why don't we just go down the table?
Actually, have a statement first.
Okay. Oh, your statement. Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry. Well, I think good afternoon now, I guess it is. So I have a brief statement, then I'd be happy to take your questions. Today marks my 1-month anniversary as chairman, so if I can just make it to tomorrow, I won't be the William Henry Harrison of the FCC. 1 month in, I think it's appropriate to take stock of how things are going. Thanks to the outstanding efforts of the commission staff, many of whom are arrayed around the room, and the work of my colleagues, Commissioners Clyburn and O'Reilly, we've already made meaningful progress on a number of fronts. Topping the list would be our efforts to spur broadband deployment so that every American can enjoy the benefits of the digital age. As you may recall, in my first week of office, we approved a bipartisan plan supported by Governor Cuomo, Senator Schumer, and Representative Collins to provide $170 million to connect unserved parts of New York State. And a few minutes ago, we voted to advance Phase 2 of the Mobility Fund, which will direct over $4 billion in financial support for mobile broadband to parts of rural America where 4G LTE service simply doesn't exist. This is a major step toward closing the digital divide in rural America, and it was a core part of the digital empowerment agenda that I introduced last September. We also approved new rules to deliver $2 billion in Connect America Fund support to deploy fixed broadband in unserved rural areas. These are all complicated programs, but the end result is simple. For the first time, many Americans across this nation will finally be able to enjoy high-speed internet access and all the applications and services that go along with that, from precision agriculture to telemedicine to e-commerce. Now, that's on the programmatic side. In terms of process, we have also laid a foundation for continuing efforts to expand and improve wired and wireless networks by establishing our Broadband Deployment Advisory Committee. The demand to serve on this committee has been overwhelming, and the Commission's staff is currently in the process of reviewing more than 380 applications. In addition to these initiatives to promote broadband, we are unlocking new opportunities for American broadcasting. Today's unanimous vote to begin the approval process for the ATSC 3.0 transmission standard will eventually allow broadcasters to merge the capabilities of over-the-air broadcasting with broadband connectivity. Next-Gen TV promises enhanced services and expanded choice for video consumers, and I am excited to see how it progresses. Now, of course, serving the public interest requires not just smart policies, but sound processes. And that's why I have implemented a series of process reforms with the aim of making the agency more transparent and responsive to the American public. In particular, we launched a pilot program to make the text of meeting items available 3 weeks ahead of commission meetings. Now, notwithstanding the prophecies of doom from those who opposed shedding more sunlight on the Commission's operations and apparently preferred keeping the public in the dark, I'm pleased to say that we are all still alive and the Commission is still standing. Of course, I'm not going to draw any definitive conclusions from 1 month, but I think we can safely say at this point, so far, so good. And I will have an update for you in the coming days on where we go from here. We've also adopted other process reforms, such as promoting commissioners' involvement in reviewing consent decrees and issuing concise fact sheets for our public proposals. I'm sure there will be more to come, but I hope the public will see and appreciate the trends thus far. Divesting power from the chairman's office, making the FCC more transparent and more open, building a more collegial culture within this agency, and finally, actually doing something about it instead of just talking about it. I'm gratified that we have been able to make so much progress together in a meaningful way and in such a limited time. And again, I'm very grateful for my colleagues and the best asset this agency has, the FCC staff, who have helped make it all possible. And with that, I will welcome your questions, starting with Montague.
I was wondering, you've talked a lot recently about AM revitalization. Have you any timeline for the new FM class that you proposed? or at least endorsed when you were commissioner?
The Class C4?
Yes, sir.
That's one of the things we're still reviewing, and so we're talking to FCC staff, and hopefully I haven't had a chance to meet with some of the stakeholders of late, but I hope to be able to do that in the time to come to make a determination on whether to move forward, and if we do so, how to do it. So stay tuned on that subject. Thank you.
Kyle Daly, Bloomberg BNA. So while in the minority, you and Commissioner O'Reilly were pretty vocal critics of overuse of delegated authority, but a few of the early actions under your leadership have been made on delegated authority. So can you kind of explain some of the thinking there? And I guess also Commissioner O'Reilly put out that proposal about delegated authority yesterday. Do you support that? Do you think you'll take that up?
I saw that he had posted that on the blog. I haven't had a chance to read it. Yesterday was, as you might imagine, a little bit busy with a very active agenda today. But I obviously take his input on process reform very seriously, as I do from Commissioner Clyburn as well. I look forward to reading it, and if there are ideas that he's proposed that I think would make for good government and help improve the agency's processes, I'll certainly be open to thinking about it. I think the record shows over the last couple of weeks that if I see a good idea, I could care less who proposes it or who gets credit for it. I want to do it and make it happen. So we'll see what happens with that particular proposal. In terms of delegated authority more generally, our criticism in the previous administration was pretty simple, that the rules specify if something is new and novel or is otherwise outside of the scope of the authority granted the various bureaus and offices under the FCC's rules, then the full commission has to review it. And in the case of the delegated authority items that you're referring to, those items were themselves issued on delegated authority. So all we simply did was have the very same bureaus and offices take a look and put things on pause. And so that's entirely consistent with the position we took in the previous administration.
Margaret McGill with Politico. Without getting into any specific actions you might take, can you just discuss your views generally on paid prioritization?
I can't at this time. As I said, I've said very generally that I favor a free and open internet, and nothing has changed my view about that since the last time we talked.
Okay, so does paid prioritization, does that belong in a free and open internet?
Again, I'm not going to comment on some of the issues involving the net trial. I'm not going to be making any news on that front today.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. Brian Fung from the Washington Post. Would it be prudent to wait and see how the D.C. Circuit decides on whether to do the en banc rehearing in the open internet case before, drawing up any legislation or before, here at the FCC engaging in any kind of, proposed rulemaking on Title II?
This is one of the factors that is going into our thinking. So we're studying the issue, and as I said, I think yesterday it was, I've been meeting with members of Congress, both sides of the aisle, to hear their views about this issue, and so we're taking all the factors into account as we try to come to a decision.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. David McKay from Axios. In 2015, you voiced support for a minimum contribution in the Lifeline program. Then you didn't mention it when you dissented from the 2016 order. So in the interest of clarifying your position on some of these issues, I'm wondering what your current view is with regard to whether or not requiring a minimum contribution from subscribers would meet the goals you've laid out for the program.
Sure. So the proposal you mentioned, I think I outlined in a speech to Citizens Against Government Waste in 2014. Was it 2015?
It was in the 2015 dissent.
Okay, so I first mentioned, I believe, in 2014 in a speech that I'd given, and I said, look, that is one of the steps that people have proposed as a way to ensure that to promote fiscal responsibility and the responsible use of the Lifeline subsidies. And so, as for where we go from here in terms of policy, that's one of the things we'll consider, and I certainly look forward to hearing from my colleagues as well. To see what views they might have about it going forward.
In 2015, you said that 25% contribution was kind of maybe a good level. I'm wondering where you stand on that now.
No particular number is settled in my mind. I'm obviously flexible. The ultimate goal, I think, is to make sure that recipients, wireless resellers, et cetera, use the Lifeline program responsibly. And that, as to where the particular number falls, that end goal, I think, is the critical thing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. Amir Nasser, Morning Counsel. Wanted to ask about the open internet order proceeding. Like you just mentioned that you met with members of Congress yesterday on both sides of the aisle.
Not yesterday, but I have met with them.
But you have met with them. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good clarification. I'm curious because Marsha Blackburn had said that she wanted to wait for you, the FCC, to make a move before they did anything with legislation. Is that your understanding of how this is going to go forward as well?
From her perspective, do you
From
mean?
your perspective, that the FCC would make the first move?
Well, no, again, why we haven't made, this is part of the process that we're engaged in, is in trying to understand what everyone's opinion is thus far. And so we haven't reached our own firm opinion one way or the other. But obviously her view, given that she's the chairwoman of the subcommittee of jurisdiction, we've been in touch with her and we've heard her out.
Thank you.
T.R. Daly.
Hi.
With respect to the enhanced transparency exemption, you mentioned a compromise that was based or reflective of Representative Lobsak's suggestion. I wonder if you could flesh that out. And also, do you see any tension between, you just mentioned keeping the American public in the dark as part of the process reform, that you don't want that, but here you seem to be saying that the companies don't need to be transparent with their potential consumers. So.
No, that's not at all what we are saying. To the contrary, what we are saying is that if there are reporting requirements that are not necessary and that burden small providers disproportionately and by definition require them to devote scarce resources to filling out paperwork as opposed to building out broadband, then that's something that ultimately is not in the interest of the consumer. And that is, that's a common thread for all of these actions that I've described, whether it is this or the Part 32 accounting requirements, which I know are arcane. But again, if you're spending millions of dollars on this collecting this information that the SEC literally never even uses, those $1 million are down the drain from the perspective of an end user who doesn't get the digital connections that he or she would like to be able to rely upon. Or same thing with FM chips and smartphones. I mean, that would allow consumers to stream radio content that they like on their phones to preserve battery life and free from any data limits. And so, I mean, these are all the end result is always going to be the focus is always going to be on what is the best result for the American consumer. And the way I strike the balance, the way the House of Representatives unanimously struck the balance, was at this threshold and in this way. And so I take heart from the fact that we try to follow Congress's lead in this regard, and I continue look forward to working with Commissioner Clyburn, Commissioner O'Reilly in ways to ensure that we strike that balance appropriately.
And the Representative Lobsak's suggestion, I wasn't quite sure what it was.
Oh, yes. So I approached Commissioner Clyburn with an offer. I'll leave it to her to describe the particulars of that offer if she would like, but the offer was consistent with what I understand Congressman Lobsak's suggestion to be, and I would have accepted it had she accepted, obviously, since I proposed it, but she turned it down. And so, I can't do anything more than offer, and if the offer is turned down, then we'll return, as we did, to the 250,000 person threshold that was specified by Congress.
Thank you.
Howard Busker, Communications Daily. Hello. Mr. Chairman, congratulations on your first 30 days. It only seems like 3.5 weeks. So it's flown. But I wanted to ask you, two of the things that Republicans, when they were in the minority, criticized the past administration was that there wasn't enough economic analysis, cost-benefit analysis, and that the door wasn't open to negotiate things, that you just kind of got steamrolled when you tried to get changes. And I was just wondering, is it your sense that that's really changing under your regime, and can you give us a little color on that? I was hoping for more than just, stand by, more to come. So,
to be clear, stand by, more to come was just with respect to whether we would continue the pilot program.
Oh, no, I understand. I understand. It's just, but I was just asking for color. I didn't mean to.
Oh, no, absolutely. I mean, look, if you listen to Commissioner Clyburn's comments, for example, on the first two major items, I mean, these are things I believe in very deeply. Closing the digital divide, providing rural and low-income urban Americans with digital opportunity. I easily could have said, you know what, I've got this idea, and we're just going to ram it through. I don't really care what you have to think. But I said to her early on, I value your opinion. I want to hear where you are. and let's see if we can work together. And I directed my staff to say, let's try to accommodate Commissioner Clyburn's concerns to the extent she has some. If she has additional ideas for things to include, let's see if we can accommodate that as well. And the end result was what you saw today, which is on items that historically have been exceptionally difficult. I mean, CAF has been sitting around for years, MF2 has been sitting around for years. We were able to reach a bipartisan agreement that at the end of the day, I would like to think speaks well of both the collegiality at this commission, but also the end results for the American consumer, because she has ideas that I think are very valuable and important to incorporate. And those are obviously the bigger ticket items. I mean, there are a whole bunch of things that might fly below the radar. I mean, even the process reform suggestion on issuing fact sheets. I mean, we didn't have to do that, and certainly when I was in the minority, we had a lot of suggestions like that were routinely dismissed. But I said, that's a good idea. Let's do it. I value your opinion about it. And if there are other things we can do that you think would be helpful in streamlining the agency's operations or involving commissioners more often in the decision-making process, we're open to considering that as well. So to me, I mean, look, I came into this field in the late 90s, early 2000s at a time when partisan affiliation didn't have anything to do with where you stood on a lot of these issues. And so I look forward to working with my colleagues in that spirit going forward, and you saw a little bit of that today.
Thank you.
How are you doing, Chairman Pai? Ali Breland with The Hill. I had a question concerning a report that Morning Consult did a little while ago talking about how FCC sources had said that reversing portions of net neutrality would be very difficult because of certain legal considerations. I was wondering what specific measures this would be a concern for moving forward.
Sorry, I didn't quite understand the question.
Yeah, so the report cited FCC sources who talked about how certain portions of net neutrality, like certain provisions, would be hard to reverse because they'd already been approved by the FCC, and simply going back on them could pose legal issues. I was wondering what specific measures that this would be like an issue for.
I mean, that's part of what we're trying to figure out is what the lay of the land is in terms of the legal landscape as well. So I mean, I can't say what that is, but I'm aware of people who have made those comments, of course.
So this is something that is a point of concern for you guys. Then you are afraid that certain things can't be touched.
No, not an area of concern, but it just it's one of the we want to understand what the full range of options is legally speaking, and we're still studying the issue in that regard.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Hello.
Are you doing any kind of outreach to members of the Senate, in particular, on the potential rollback of the privacy rule?
No.
Okay.
Hi, Chairman. Harper Neidig from the Hill newspaper. Could you talk a little bit about any dialogue you've had with the White House concerning net neutrality or rural broadband expansion? And could you also tell us how the hiring freeze has affected your first couple of months or couple of weeks as chairman?
Sure. As to the first, none. And I have spoken with members of Congress about the importance of rural broadband, and as part of the infrastructure package, which I understand they might be considering, with some of the folks I've spoken to on both sides of the aisle, I've stressed that, look, I know you guys have a lot on your plate in terms of infrastructure, roads and bridges and all the rest, but keep an eye out for broadband, because I think that's something that, number one, is bipartisan. I have yet to hear about a consumer who says, I only want broadband if a Republican or a Democrat proposes it. And secondly, that it would really make a difference, I think, in improving the economic prospects of some of these areas. And one of the examples I've spoken with a recent congressman was some of my travels to Alaska Native villages above the Arctic Circle and small towns in Mississippi, and even a feedlot where I recently was in Allen, Kansas, population 75. I mean, places that you would never travel to unless you actually lived there. And these are the places that are, I would say, falling off the grid, but they were never on the grid to begin with. And if we can empower those people with digital opportunity, I mean, there's no telling what kind of chances they would have for a better future. And that's something I'm glad to see here in my meetings with them has really resonated. I think they get it, and they understand that if Congress can speak with a unified voice on this, that we'll all be better off. Everyone will get the credit, and that's a good thing.
and the hiring freeze?
Oh, the hiring freeze, yes. Sorry. I was on my little soliloquy there. So, yeah, I mean, the hiring freeze applies to us, and so we're still trying to determine what the agency, what resources the agency will be able to take advantage of in that context. And so I'm not an expert in the arcane rules involved here, but we're working with our administrative experts and our counsels to see what's possible.
Thank you.
By the way, before talking into, I do want to say that given the resources we have, I mean, you've seen today on 6 very diverse, complicated items, the very best of the commission, just delivering value for the American taxpayer. And so I'm just glad to see that whoever's here now in the audience or who was here at the dais, I mean, they just did a fantastic job. So I'm just so lucky to call them coworkers, frankly. Sorry.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. Todd Shields, Bloomberg News. Time Warner has applied to sell WPCH TV in Atlanta to Meredith. Will you use that license transfer as a lever or a means to inspect the entire $85 billion attempt by AT&T to buy Time Warner?
This is news to me, so it will not surprise you if I don't express an opinion about it on the fly. Hope. Yeah.
The question of their licenses has been out there for quite a while now, including several dozen other type of licenses that Time Warner holds, FCC-issued licenses. How about those licenses? Have you considered whether this should give you traction to examine the deal as 13 U.S. senators have requested? Thanks.
Oh, we have not yet. No, sorry. I have not yet.
Hi, Chairman Pai.
Hello.
This is Jenna, Law 360. Just wanted to ask, not to belabor the point on net neutrality, but you mentioned Michael Powell's sort of guiding principles as something you endorse.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean voluntary rather than mandatory standards, or what's your thinking overall?
Well, look, I mean, his 4 freedoms, as he expressed them eloquently so many years ago, I think, are things that still resonate. And so whatever the regulatory or legislative framework is, I would hope that the appropriate entities would take those into account. And those are principles that endure precisely because I think both Internet users and Internet companies have thrived in this under a framework that has embraced all of them. So, yeah, as I said, we're still considering the way forward, but I think those 4 core freedoms are something that we would like to see people embrace.
Hey. Hi, Mr. Chairman. Brennan Bordelon with Morning Consult. Congratulations on your first month.
Thank you.
A few questions on ISP privacy rules.
Okay.
I'm sure you're aware of the Congressional Review Act discussion. Lawmakers.
I've heard a little bit about that.
Yeah. Are you comfortable with that sort of being the avenue of approach to revoking these rules, or is this something you prefer to go through at the commission level?
Oh, that's entirely a decision for elected officials to make, and I don't pretend to be in a position to either prescribe to them or even recommend to them what the course of action should be. I'll defer to our committees of jurisdiction and others in leadership on both sides of Capitol Hill to make that determination.
Obviously, you were a long-time critic. Well, not that long because it was just passed late last year. But you were a critic of the rules when they were passed. Is it safe to say that because of this discussion in Congress, are you sort of holding off on any sort of rulemaking or drafting of rules to repeal this at the commission level? Are you waiting to see what Congress does on this issue?
Well, we're obviously studying the issue again closely, as we are the sort of broader concepts that are involved here, and so we haven't reached any decision yet. But I mean, obviously, we would take we would be monitoring what happens on Capitol Hill very closely.
And last one, have you talked to any of the lawmakers involved in this discussion, and has there been any sort of coordination between the commission and these lawmakers on what to do with the privacy rules?
There's been no coordination. I mean, I've obviously spoken. I spoke with Congresswoman Blackburn, for example, about rural broadband and things like that. But there's no explicit plan that where we do this and you do that. There's nothing like that at all. Hello.
Hi, Chairman Pai. McKenna Kelly from CQ. So I have a question on the petition to stay the broadband privacy rule. I was curious if you knew what the status of that was as of right now.
That one we are studying actively, and so we obviously will have to make an appropriate determination at the right time.
Okay, so what kind of timeline are you looking at right now for that?
I can't really comment on the specific timeline, but I can't really go beyond what I've said, which is that we're actively looking at right now, and hopefully have something to report in the short term.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hi there, Alex Byers with Politico. You took the set-top box proceeding off the FCC circulation list a few weeks ago. I think we know generally your thoughts on both the FCC's original NPRM and sort of how the proposal had been changed in last fall, which was obviously you weren't a fan. But going back to your dissent from last February, right at the beginning, you said the current set-top box marketplace is a product of an intrusive regulatory regime. Something has to change. So should we expect something from you on those issues? Because it seems like you have pointed out that there is a problem.
Well, I think something is changing, which is that the marketplace is innovating around the more archaic regulatory regulations that the more regulatory issues that the FCC has imposed upon this marketplace. And so what I said at the time, I thought was, look, we're sitting here having a debate about doubling down on 1990s era technology, which is a set-top box. We should move that conversation to getting rid of the box, which is where I think consumers are. And in a lot of cases, consumers and video companies are leading by example. A lot of these companies are introducing apps. In most cases, they're free, and consumers are enjoying that, and they're streaming more than ever before, watching content on the devices of their choice, at the time of their choice, et cetera. And so, my hope obviously is to encourage a market-based approach to these issues.
Well, sure, but if there is, as you term it, an intrusive regulatory regime, right, even if the market is, as I think you just said, sort of innovating around that, isn't there also a need to get rid of the intrusive regulatory regime?
Oh, I see.
Or can the market just do that itself, and you can leave the intrusive regulatory regime in place?
Right. No, I see what you're saying. No, my comments at the time were directed, obviously, to the very intrusive and I think ill-advised course that the Commission was proposing at the time. And so, as to how to approach the regulatory system as it stood, the status quo, essentially, that's something that we haven't yet made a determination about. So that taking it off circulation was simply the standard operating procedure. When a new chairman comes in, you put things on pause, and I think there were 24 items or so that we did that for. And so all of those items we're going to review in the time to come and try to figure out how to move forward. Okay, thanks, guys. Good to see you.
We're going to go ahead and do the Bureau press conference now, so why don't we just go through item by item and see if we have questions. So the first one was the Mobility Fund. Any questions on mobility? Yes, okay.
Good afternoon. I'm Nisha Gindelsberger. I'm going to defer to my senior deputy on the questions to answer on this item.
Okay. I just had a couple questions. I was a little unclear about what you're seeking additional information on. I thought there was I'd heard that there might be questions asked about the challenge process, for example. Can you give us a little more on that?
Yeah, you basically hit the nail on the head with regard to the further notice. As was referred to with regard to eligible areas, the general CAF approach has been for a staff to put out a set of preliminary eligible areas, whether on the wireline or the wireless side, and then have a challenge process where people can file and say that they think the data that we put out is wrong one way or the other. And then at the end of the challenge process, staff would decide on a final list of eligible areas. And what the Commission decided to do is, rather than deciding all the issues in this report in order based on the record, to seek further comment on at least a couple of options plus any other approaches in terms of trying to come up with a challenge process that balances all the factors that the Commissioners mentioned were important to them. So it's an important part to sort of finalize the details of how the challenge process will work for Mobility Fund 2.
Okay.
But that's what the further notice is about.
I think, and there were a lot of questions about the adequacy of the Form 477 data, but I guess that would be rolled into that challenge process stuff.
Yeah,
right?
the structure is that we're starting with the 477 data as the foundation that we're starting from. Yeah, because it's the best available information that's out there. It's submitted to the commission and certified as accurate. But then the challenge process was always assumed to give folks an opportunity to say that the data submitted in the 477 isn't accurate.
Thank you.
Any others on mobility? Okay. Next is Connect America Phase 2. Any questions on that item? All right, moving on. Next Generation TV. Okay, Monty, some Media Bureau.
Yeah, I got a couple questions about analog tuners. CTA has said that there's troubling language in the draft about the tuner mandate. Can you guys comment on that at all?
I think you'll see in the item that is released, which hopefully will be later this afternoon, that we explain why we feel the need to address the tuner issue in the NPRM, given our current rules.
Okay, that might partially answer my second question, which was if you could explain why if the mandate's not in there, why is it in the NPRM? But I think you're saying it's all in the draft.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, that's all I got.
Okay.
Any others on Next Gen? No? Okay. AM revitalization. Don't go away yet. No one there? Okay.
Oh, wait. I got an AM question.
Okay.
I was just wondering if you could respond to I noticed that you guys said something about how it'll affect LPFM, but I mean there was like a last minute like filing on about concerns that it might have for LPFM. Can you say why those concerns aren't merited? I mean, how's it going to take care of them?
I'm going to defer to the audio management clear.
Sure.
Low-power FMs are protected under our rules from move-in translators under a contour scheme. It's the same scheme that full-power NCE stations operate under. So the premise that the translators moving would interfere with the low-power stations is not consistent with how we define interference.
Gotcha. Thank you, Mr. Doyle.
Okay. I think that's it. Small business exemption. All right. 2 for that. So CGB.
So I just had one question. I was trying to get a feel for scope. Do you have anything in terms of numbers on when you go from 100,000 to 250,000, what that does to the number of ISPs that will be covered?
So the commission keeps internal data on that. You should take a look at the item when it comes out to see how it kind of parses through it. The focus really is, though, on that 250,000 subscriber threshold that the commissioners mentioned.
I have kind of a similar question. Do you have any numbers on how many consumers are served by, and I don't mean the difference necessarily, but just for the total of the affected companies, the 250,000 threshold, how many consumers are served?
So you should look at the item. I'm not sure it mentions a specific number, but we know that it's a considerable number of smaller businesses that have said, and you'll see this reflected in the item in our record, that said that they could save the money that they would spend on these compliance requirements to serve consumers better through improved broadband.
Thank you.
Commissioner O'Reilly said, let's find the exact quote, the question of whether the transparency requirements should exist at all will have to wait for another day in the near future. Is that something that you're actively reviewing?
That is probably a question better posed to the chairman and commissioners.
And the last item is the accounting rules. Any questions on the accounting rules item? Come on, Lynn. That's for you. Okay, I guess not. All right. Thank you, everybody.